Hello everybody, I'm Silly. This will be part 6, chapter 6 of Through the Eyes of a Quirkless Child. Dabi watched the sun set on Kamino Ward, a wide grin pulling at his staples uncomfortably. Any minute now, Shigaraki's sensei would be taking them to capture All Might. Personally, Dabi never really cared about the number one hero. His father's hatred for All Might was enough to convince Dabi to be neutral on the man. This was until Izuku told them exactly what he had done. Now, Dabi was a great white, and there was blood in the water. A crack of thunder exploded somewhere in the distance, and rain fell heavily upon the city. Dabi breathed out a laugh, holding his palm out to catch stray droplets. How fitting, for the atmosphere to be so dramatic. He should go inside. Water didn't do much good for his scars. But he took a moment to bask in the ambience. If this went well, it meant he could not only get justice for Izuku, but he could get justice for himself, for Shoto, for Natsuo and Fumi. He could accomplish his goal. Maybe he could go back to his family someday. But first things first. Taking down All Might took priority. Dabi rolled his eyes and scoffed. The symbol of peace. What a joke. The man was good for nothing, more of a villain than Dabi would ever be. He was an abuser. He didn't deserve to be called a hero. Stain clearly had gotten something wrong, or he missed the memo that All Might was really just a sack of shit. Because Izuku and All Might were nowhere near being in the same league of heroics. Izuku was selfless, caring, everything a hero should be. And All Might hadn't even done enough good in his life to deserve being in the same room as Izuku. There were no words to describe how Dabi felt about him that even came close to being accurate. He sighed, stepping back into the bar, shaking the excess water off his coat. He glanced around the room, finding the rest of the league, minus Shigaraki, were sitting or standing anxiously, trying to pretend like they weren't 2 seconds away from exploding with nervousness or excitement. Magne looked like she was going to throw up, while Toga was bouncing on her heels, holding a polished knife in each hand. The grin on her face made Dabi shudder. The bloodlust was tangible. As the sun finally vanished over the horizon, a small TV flicked to life on the counter. Krogiri, I'll be sending you the coordinates to open your portal shortly. The rest of you, be ready. The moment the portal is open, attack. All Might will be warped directly to your location, and, if you are to fail now, Izuku will be back in the hands of the heroes by morning. All for One's voice echoed through the bar before the TV clicked off again. The energy in the room flipped from anxious to bloodthirsty in a split second. They stood at attention, quirks at the ready, weapons in hand. They would defeat All Might, they would keep Izuku safe, and they would not fail. Yagi Toshinori was, for all intents and purposes, having a regular day. Aside from meeting with Tsukuuchi earlier in the day to discuss his missing successor, everything was going swimmingly. He knew the other heroes were thinking him a fool for being so nonchalant about the whole situation, but he trusted young Midoriya to fend for himself. He had the power of One for All on his side, after all. There was no reason that the boy couldn't find his own way out. He was still on that train of thought, wondering how much longer young Midoriya was going to take in his escape, when a dark portal appeared under his feet. Not having noticed it before taking his next step, and he fell face first into a dingy bar. It took him a moment too long to explode into his muscle form and get into a ready stance, if the shocked looks on the villains' faces were anything to go by. Toshinori didn't waste any time thinking about it. The villains would be dead or in jail by the time he was done with them. They had dared to attack the symbol of peace, and for that, they would pay dearly. Dabi barely had any time to process the fact that a walking skeleton had just transformed into All Might before the hero was launching a punch in his direction. Dabi jumped to the side, setting off a massive flume of flame at him. He wasn't going to hold his punches now, and it seemed neither was anyone else. He pulled back his flame just in time for Toka to throw herself at the number one hero, slashing at his throat with one knife and carving a deep gash through the front of his chest with the other. In the next moment, while All Might was reeling back from Toka's attack, Compress appeared behind him, and the number one hero was nothing more than a marble. They would have to get him to the doctor, and fast, but they had won. All Might, the symbol of peace, the man that many called the greatest hero of all time, was helpless in their grasp. Dabi chuckled darkly at this, bending over and catching his breath against a wall. Shigaraki-sensei must know what he was doing. Dabi had thought, at first, that trapping themselves in an enclosed space with All Might was a horrible idea. He assumed that the pro would set off a retort smash or something, demolishing not only the bar but every other building in a half-mile radius. From what Izuku had said, the man clearly had no regard for life, so they must have caught him off guard enough to keep him from murdering them on the spot. They had gotten lucky, Dabi knew that. But he also knew that now that they had him, the number one hero would never see the light of day again. As Magne and Compress rushed off through Kogiri's warp to the doctor, Dabi took a seat at the bar and thought back on what he just saw before the fight began. Had they captured the wrong person? Was that why All Might, or the imposter rather, looked completely different when he fell through Kogiri's warp? Must be. All Might has a strength enhancement quirk, not a transformation quirk. Whoever they captured had to be a fake, and Dabi hated to think of the implications of that. The fact that All Might had someone walking around pretending to be him possibly meant the heroes knew the League was after him. If that were true, it would be very bad. But surely Shigaraki-sensei wouldn't have made such a mistake as transporting a fake to the bar instead of the real deal. Shigaraki pretty much never stopped going on about how smart his sensei was, how incredible, how strong. If everything he bragged about was true, the man would never mistake a fake for the real All Might. But if that were the case... Dabi's eyes widened a fraction. If that really was All Might, then why the hell did he look like that? How could he change his appearance and apparently his physical strength at will? Oh. Dabi almost smacked himself when he realized it. He was worried over nothing. Obviously, it was something to do with All Might's strength quirk. He must have a weak form and a strong form. It made sense that the public had never seen the weak form. Dabi could see how villains would be foaming at the mouth knowing the symbol of peace had a glaring blind spot. How odd, though, that no one seemed to know about his other appearance. Not Grian, not Shigaraki. Absolutely everyone was in the dark about it. He knew it would be expensive to buy knowledge of the symbol of peace's weakness, but Shigaraki would have given anything to know about it. If not even the top information brokers knew, then All Might must have one hell of a PR team. Or maybe not even his allies knew. He sighed and leaned back slightly on the bar stool. He wasted so much energy on bordering on a panic attack over nothing. Oh well. Standing on cracking knees, he stretched his arms over his head and popped his back. Maybe by now, Kogiri would have news. Oi, Kogiri. Do you know what happened with All Might yet? They've been gone for a while. Kogiri sighed, placing a polished glass on the shelves behind the counter and forming a portal. Why don't you go check for yourself? I'm not a psychic, Dobby. I know what you know. That's it. If Kogiri had eyes to roll, he would. All right, no need to get touchy. Dobby smirked, sauntering away from the bar casually in an attempt to hide his embarrassment, and stepped through the portal, taking him to the doctor. On the other side of the portal, he was met with chaos. Screaming, crashing, scalpels and suture needles flying. Before he could change his mind and walk back through to the bar, Kogiri's portal closed. Just in time, too. A rogue scalpel hit the wall where the portal was not a half second after it closed. Why did Dobby always end up in these situations? It just wasn't fair. He ducked behind an examination table as a large roll of medical tape flew at his head. What the hell was happening? He got his answer not a moment later when All Might screamed, and following the sound was a chorus of replying shouts and crashes. Most notably, the doctor yelling to hold him down so I can get the sedative in. Dobby bit back the urge to rip out his hair out of frustration. Had they really not seen this coming? Alright. Ignoring his friend's poor decision-making skills, they needed help. The number one pro hero was dangerous at the best of times, and when he was riled up like this, All Might was beyond lethal. Dobby moved slowly around the table towards the commotion, crouching low to the ground as he walked. He definitely wasn't about to die to flying medical equipment. He twisted around as he came to a doorway, back pressing flat against the wall. Peering over his shoulder into the adjoining room, he saw what he would have assumed was a strange nightmare under any other circumstances. All Might was in a terrified daze, partially sedated, an IV tube dripping blood stuck haphazardly in the back of his hand. Surrounding him in a semicircle was the doctor, Magne, and Compress. The doctor had a syringe in each hand and looked ready to pounce. Magne and Compress held up their hands defensively, as if All Might was a feral animal. Dobby would have laughed if he weren't at risk of getting his head caved in. Dobby turned away from the other room, hiding behind the wall. He had to think. It was only by luck that they had defeated All Might before, so there was no way the hero was going to allow himself to be caught off guard again. Being trapped in a basement filled to the brim with medical equipment and torture devices definitely didn't help his anxiety, which Dobby could sympathize with. He would probably flip his lid too if he woke up in a basement from the fucking human centipede. Still trying to think of a way to get All Might sedated, Dobby sighed quietly and looked up. That was it. He could crawl through the drop ceiling, jump onto All Might's shoulders, and hopefully that would be enough of a surprise for the doctor to finally sedate the hero. This plan was almost destined to fail, honestly, but it was the best one he had. And trying to talk with anyone in the other room to think up of a better plan would ruin the element of surprise. He would just have to make it up as he went, not unlike almost everything else the League was involved in. Stealing his nerves, Dobby climbed up a bookshelf and pulled himself up into the ceiling as quietly as possible. He crawled silently through the ceiling until the screams and crashes were right below him. This was it. Now or never. With a loud shout, Dabi ripped the ceiling tile back and jumped onto All Might's shoulders. He pummeled the hero's head with his fist. Not too hard, hopefully just enough to knock him unconscious. The screaming intensified, somehow more head-splitting than before. Compress and Magne were yelling at him, asking just what the hell he thought he was doing. All Might was thrashing and trying to rip Dabi off of his back. Dabi resolutely ignored the desire to run away, gritted his teeth, and powered through the bruises and scratches. After what felt like an eternity, the doctor snapped out of his daze and injected All Might with what looked like at least 4 doses of sedative. The hero gave a few more half-hearted punches and grabs at Dabi before collapsing onto a table the doctor had rolled in front of them. Perfect timing, too, because Dabi was down at least 10 staples, and it felt like he had been put through a blender. All Might was no joke. Being on the receiving end of his attacks was not something Dabi wanted to experience ever again. Oh, what the fuck? That was the stupidest thing I think I've ever done. My body is made of pain. My soul has ascended and I think I'm dying. Tell Shiggy I hate him. Dabi slid to the ground, throwing his arms over his head dramatically as the doctor pulled All Might onto the exam table. Magne and Compress rolled their eyes at Dabi's over-the-top final words, sitting down on the ground next to him. Dabi, hun, you have no idea. I think I astral projected when All Might came out of the marble swinging. Magne laughed, out of breath. Sweat was dripping down her brow, and her face was flushed red with exertion. Compress only responded by groaning and leaning his head onto Dabi's shoulder. Let's agree to never fight people with strength quirks ever again. Ever again. They all nodded at Dabi's statement, Magne and Compress still breathing heavily, soaked with sweat. Dabi took a breath to make another joke, something to lighten the mood, but was cut short as a piercing, red-hot pain exploded in his ribs. Huh. Oh no. Dabi whispered, face losing all color as he slumped to the side, completely limp. Dark blood had soaked through his white shirt and began to run down his torso. Alright, everybody, that concludes Part 6, Chapter 6 of Through the Eyes of a Quirkless Child. Sorry this has taken me so long to get out. I've kind of fallen out of this fic, and I feel like that's really shown through the fact that I haven't posted the next update in like a few months. But anyway, I've also been very, very busy. I've left notes about it in my work, Susurrus of the Subdued. But if you don't look at that work on AO3, you're not going to see those notes. I'm going to probably post the same notes onto my community page on why I haven't really been posting as much. It's mainly, though, just mental health and the fact, that I've been busy. But besides that, please make sure to check out the Discord if you haven't already. If you would like to get updates easier, get connected with people within the fanfiction community, make requests for a podfic, and more. The link to the server will be in the description. Now, I hope you enjoyed, and thank you for listening.